My wife, Sherry, believed I was unaware of her plans, thinking I was either foolish or oblivious to her growing affair with her coworker Todd. She assumed I'd tolerate her actions and accept her continuing to be involved with him. However, she had another thing coming. She didn't realize I'd been suspicious for quite some time. I noticed changes, clear signs of infidelity, like working late frequently, upgrading her wardrobe, more aggressive closeness, and a loss of interest in our shared interests. Despite my attempts to discuss my concerns, she consistently ignored them. Sherry, naturally, denied anything was wrong, attributing it to my insecurities and possessiveness working overtime. I had no choice but to hire a private investigator. I refused to remain blind to the truth. I'd made it clear from the beginning of our relationship, and reiterated it over our 10-year marriage, that I would never tolerate my wife cheating on me. So it was with mixed feelings that I sat in private investigator Jake Sloan's office and listened to his report. I felt relieved when he made it clear that Sherry hadn't cheated. However, that relief was short-lived when he added the term, "for now." As he explained, my wife was having an affair. It just hadn't escalated to something intimate, but it was only a matter of time. Apparently, Sherry and Todd referred to themselves as working spouses. I detested that term. Sherry had only one spouse, me. Some might find that expression cute and harmless, but to me, it meant she was having an intimate relationship with someone else. Well, as it turns out, that's exactly what she was having. According to the private investigator's report, Sherry and Todd had lunch together daily, just the two of them. They held hands and sat next to each other. He provided numerous photos of them hugging, sometimes even kissing. I was infuriated by what I saw and wanted to strangle that smug idiot Todd. In addition to lunches, the lovers often worked late together, even though there was no good reason for it. It was as if they wanted to avoid going home to their respective spouses and siphon as much of our time out of each day as possible. The detective told me that he was able to trace Sherry's emails and messages. I knew this was completely illegal and I could never use it in a divorce. In our state, divorce for infidelity was possible but difficult. No-fault divorces were much easier, and I didn't need evidence for that anyway. I just wanted it for my own purposes. Sloan refused to give me copies of the actual messages. He wouldn't even let me see them. Instead, he offered me a summary of what they contained. He assured me that my wife had never spoken disparagingly of me. Several times Todd tried to disparage me, but Sherry wouldn't let him. Well, I guess it could have been worse. Emails and texts confirmed their romantic relationship. Although neither of them professed love, their conversations were very intimate, bordering on texting. Todd sent my wife pictures of his buddy, which she took delight in reciprocating with shots of her bare chest. As far as Sloan could tell, she hadn't sent any explicit pictures yet. As I sat in his office pondering my next steps, Sloan gave me the worst news of all. Todd's wife was going out of town for 3 days to visit her mother. The lovers decided to take the opportunity to meet up and consummate their relationship. The only thing standing in their way was me. They were uncertain about how they could spend the night together if I remained in the vicinity. Since I had no intention of leaving town, making it nearly impossible, they contemplated various plans. One idea was to inform me that Sherry was going on a girls-only weekend trip, fearing I might discover the truth by talking to her friends. However, she didn't want to involve anyone to create a believable cover story, leading to the abandonment of that idea. Another option they considered was compelling me to leave town, but I dismissively remembered Sherry suggesting I organize a golf trip with my buddies, an option I rejected. Ultimately, they opted for a new but direct approach: honesty. Todd believed I was on the path to becoming a betrayed man and that I would do anything to keep Sherry as my loving, happy wife, even allowing her to have an affair. Somehow, he convinced Sherry that by sleeping with him, she would enhance our lovemaking life and relationship. He persuaded her that all she needed to do was disclose her plans with Todd to me, and I would reluctantly agree to let her proceed. Clearly, Todd underestimated my resolve, but what surprised me the most was that Sherry bought into his deceptive narrative. It should have been evident to her that I wouldn't tolerate this, and if she failed to realize that, then she might be mentally unstable. Sloan informed me that this was all the information they had, so I accepted what he provided and went home. I requested him to continue monitoring Sherry's messages and update me if anything changed. On Friday, Sloan called me and informed me that Sherry planned to meet me the following Monday after work. She intended to disclose that she would go on a date with Todd on Friday night, starting with dinner and dancing and culminating with the couple spending the night in a hotel room. She would thoughtfully return to my house on Saturday or maybe Sunday, depending on their activities. Sherry and Todd rehearsed her entire speech, convincing themselves that I would acquiesce to her demands. They anticipated my initial upset and anger, but Sherry planned to assure me that it was a one-time thing, despite both knowing otherwise. She even suggested having lovemaking with me afterward as a reward for my understanding, assuming I would be pleased to have Todd's sloppy seconds and comply with her wishes. How considerate of them to think of my needs. With only 2 days to prepare for the confrontation, Sherry and Todd jokingly referred to it as an intervention. However, I was determined to turn their intervention into my stand. Over the weekend, I contemplated various scenarios, pondering whether I wanted to salvage my marriage. My plan of action evolved organically as I considered my feelings for Sherry. I decided to confront the issue directly and end it for good. Initially blissfully happy when we first got married, Sherry and I spent all our time together, sharing everything we had experienced in life. She was my best friend and my best lover, but somehow it all seemed to disappear. Perhaps that's just the way things work. Nothing lasts forever. Maybe my view of marriage was old-fashioned and idealized, envisioning us as a team facing life's trials and tribulations together. Having experienced unsuccessful marriages before, Sherry and I questioned whether the problem lay with us or the institution of marriage itself. How can people expect to maintain feelings, desires, interests, and passions when fate insists on being fickle and changing everything and everyone? In a world of fast-paced culture, social media, and instant gratification, perhaps marriage, like dinosaurs and CDs, is obsolete. Briefly considering the idea of letting Sherry be with Todd, I quickly dismissed it, refusing to let him claim rights to my wife. I was ready for a fight when my wife called me just after lunch on Monday. "Hey, Sherry," I said, noting her recent lack of calls during my work hours. I expressed my concern about it and hoped everything was okay. She greeted me with a "Hi, honey," which made me wonder if she used the same endearment with Todd. Despite the thought, I brushed it off and inquired about her being home on time tonight, as she had something important to discuss. Responding positively, I mentioned having important news as well, and confirmed my availability around 5:15. However, she didn't respond immediately, and I sensed her motive for asking. When she asked about the nature of my big news, I decided to keep it for our later face-to-face conversation. I excused myself, citing the urgency of my monthly report, and hung up. I then informed my boss about taking the rest of the day off, and he didn't mind. Sitting at the kitchen table later, I anxiously awaited her arrival. The garage door opened at 5:27, and despite my high emotions, I maintained a calm exterior. I had an open bottle of Sauvignon Blanc on ice and 2 glasses ready. She entered alone, tossing her keys and purse on the table, and I felt relieved she hadn't brought Todd along, which would have complicated things. I welcomed her with a smile. "Hi, sweetheart," I greeted her warmly, using the affectionate term she had employed earlier. I welcomed her home and asked whether she needed some time before our conversation or if she preferred to dive right in. My immediate desire to talk took her by surprise, and I could tell she wasn't prepared for it so soon. My goal was to keep her in suspense and maintain the upper hand. Acknowledging her surprise at my readiness to talk, Sherry admitted she hadn't expected me to wait. Nevertheless, she agreed that starting our conversation sooner would be better and joined me at the table. I proposed the idea of sharing my news first and inquired if she had any objections. Hesitantly, she responded, indicating that it was okay and expressing a slight uncertainty. Without waiting for her response, I poured us both a glass of wine. She accepted it gratefully, drinking half before I refilled her glass. Starting to discuss my thoughts on the matter, I conveyed that I had been reflecting on it a lot. I made it clear that I wouldn't beat around the bush and saw no point in dragging it out. Pausing deliberately to create tension, I observed Sherry stepping forward, her gaze fixed on me. Curious, she asked, "What's the matter?" I conveyed my desire for a divorce, stating it bluntly and allowing a few moments for Sherry to grasp the message. Initially, confusion clouded her face, as if the words weren't registering. Eventually, understanding dawned, and she reacted with shock. Fear and anxiety briefly flickered across her expression, quickly replaced by surprise, perhaps stemming from concerns about her affair with Todd being exposed. In response to her query about the reason, I disclosed that my feelings had changed, expressing, "I don't love you anymore." My words appeared to affect Sherry deeply. Struggling to comprehend my statement, she questioned, "You what?" "I've fallen out of love with you, Sherry," I declared, sharing the fabricated detail that I couldn't recall the exact moment. In truth, I was well aware it had been a long time, but I had avoided confronting the reality. Perplexed, she asked, "What are you talking about?" Her expression hinted at an impending emotional breakdown, catching me off guard. In an attempt to illustrate my perspective, I prompted her to recall the early days of our marriage. Reminiscing about our shared activities and routines, I highlighted the close bond we once had. Sherry nodded in agreement as I continued, mentioning our joint lunches, the anticipation of returning home to each other, and shared hobbies, including the pottery classes she had persuaded me to join. Her intense gaze indicated she was captivated by the memories. It wasn't about the pottery, it was about sharing the experience with her. She expressed that she loved every minute of it, watching me and assisting me. She admired my enthusiasm. Similarly, painting the Christmas Village buildings became a shared activity we enjoyed. We purchased a dozen unpainted houses, creating a display for Christmas. It was a tedious task, but we found pleasure in it. Sherry admitted that mine were always better than hers. Recalling the night spent at the table applying paint to the shingles, Sherry nodded in agreement. Back then, I loved her deeply. We also dedicated hours to painting large posters she had acquired during a trip to Myrtle Beach, long before adult coloring books became popular. Although we still had hundreds of coloring pens, they, like our love, had all dried up. When Sherry defensively asserted that her love hadn't dried up, I chose to ignore her and continued. Our friends often expressed jealousy over our relationship. We did everything together, taking long walks daily while holding hands. If I needed to run errands, such as going to the hardware store for grass trimmer line, she would accompany me. Similarly, if she wanted to shop for clothes, I would patiently wait outside the dressing room. Sherry challenged me, noting that I didn't enjoy accompanying her during shopping trips. I explained that I was often on my phone, not particularly interested in the clothes, but rather there to be with her. I emphasized that I didn't mind what she chose, finding her beautiful in everything. I mentioned that I could have stayed home watching sports, but chose to be with her instead. We discussed how other women in the neighborhood gathered for activities like bingo or bachelorette parties, but Sherry never showed interest. Recalling her reason for not participating, I acknowledged her previous comment about preferring to hang out with me than with the chickens. Reflecting on our shared moments, we remembered cuddling under the covers on many nights, watching a favorite movie. Sherry, wiping a tear away, expressed her love for the film. I mentioned that we must have watched it at least 100 times, and expressed a desire to continue watching it together. In response to my mention of divorce, Sherry exclaimed her reluctance to end the marriage. She envisioned growing old together, taking cooking and ballroom dancing lessons, or simply lying in bed and reading books. Expressing the growing estrangement between us, I admitted uncertainty about when it began, looking intently into her eyes. We transitioned from dining out 2 or 3 days a week to a weekly occurrence, a change largely influenced by Sherry. She claimed a lack of time for lunch outside the office, which turned out to be untrue. She continued eating out, but with someone else. Eventually, we ceased having lunch together entirely, and I started joining my coworkers. I gradually found enjoyment in their company, perhaps even too much. In the conversation, I exaggerated the situation, making an effort not to place blame solely on Sherry. I wanted to avoid triggering defensiveness or turning the discussion into a scolding. That wasn't my goal, at least not yet. Our habit of coming home early to spend time together lost its significance. We began working later and later, and when we finally did return home, we often felt distant or distracted. Responding to Sherry's question about why I never talked about it, I acknowledged that she was right. Despite having expressed these concerns many times before, I agreed with her, expressing a wish to understand why spending time together hadn't been important for her. I admitted feeling a sense of failure in that regard. I felt like I was taking responsibility for our estrangement. That was far from the truth. I knew that if I hit Sherry with Todd first, we couldn't end the discussion without it getting nasty. I would never make her see my side of things. I'd be the controlling, jealous idiot before I revealed what I knew. I wanted her to remember what we had and think about her role in destroying it. Gradually, we stopped doing almost everything together. You started going to your bachelorette parties, I started going to poker nights, you'd go to spas on the weekends, I'd go golfing. Sherry and I began to spend entire days without discussing anything beyond the weather or the latest news. Our lovemaking life also suffered, with fatigue or lack of interest often hindering our closeness. Reflecting on our early days of marriage, I pointed out how we couldn't get enough of each other. We used to engage in intimate activities 4 or 5 days a week, sometimes multiple times a day. I mentioned playfully fondling her while she cooked, skipping dinner to spend the night together. Activities like going to the hot tub, which used to be a regular part of our routine, had become non-existent for over a year. When Sherry suggested that I didn't want lovemaking anymore, I refuted the idea, finding it baseless. I believed she might be trying to shift blame onto me to justify her own behavior. In response, I laughed and clarified, "Oh God, no, I never stopped wanting lovemaking. I'm just as eager now as I was 10 years ago. I simply stopped wanting lovemaking with you." I knew that would hurt deeply. She thought she had rejected me physically, and here I was telling her that our lack of lovemaking was because I didn't want her. I almost would have laughed if I hadn't been so hurt. Sherry, taken aback, asked what I meant when I mentioned she didn't want to have lovemaking with me. I casually mentioned losing interest and described how, from my perspective, she seemed unresponsive and disinterested in anything exciting or remotely naughty. I suggested that it appeared as though she wanted to finish quickly and move on to more interesting activities like knitting. Expressing my desire for weekend lovemaking marathons, I emphasized that she didn't even want me to give her an incredible pleasure. I labeled our physical encounters as boring and claimed that I had faked enjoyment in the last few instances just to get it over with. When Sherry objected, claiming that I came inside her, I reminded her that she insisted on using contraceptives, despite being on birth control. I explained that she never paid attention to the contraceptives, making it easy for me to fake it by humming, rolling off, and disposing of the empty contraceptive. Her reaction was one of shock and embarrassment, and I admitted that my plan had worked. Apologizing, I added insult to injury by suggesting, "It was me, not you." She stared at me for a moment, her face flushed, tears dried. I wasn't sure if her expression reflected anger, frustration, or embarrassment. In an attempt to ease the tension, I refilled her empty glass, and she took a big sip. Continuing, I explained that it was only a matter of time before we started seeking companionship elsewhere. I clarified that when I said someone else, I didn't mean myself, though she wasn't aware of that distinction. Suddenly, Sherry asked angrily if I was cheating on her or in love with someone else. In response, I reassured her of my commitment to our marriage and emphasized my aversion to infidelity. I acknowledged our shared history of being betrayed by our previous spouses, expressing my dedication to not repeating those mistakes. Sherry apologized, recognizing the unfair accusation and agreeing that she knew I wouldn't engage in such behavior. However, she looked guilty and couldn't meet my gaze, her hands trembling. Transitioning to the topic of our intimate relationship, I suggested waiting until after the divorce to be together for the first time, hinting at a new love interest. I then revealed my big news, stating that I had met with my lawyer and finalized the paperwork. I informed her that she would be served with divorce papers on Friday. In response to her desperate inquiry, I reiterated that she would indeed be served on Friday, attempting to conceal a smile. I explained that it was for the best, allowing both of us to regain our freedom, and acknowledged that the last 10 years had been a waste of our time. I expressed that the past years weren't a waste of time for me, and suggested to Sherry that she likely desired the divorce as much as I did. I mentioned that it seemed she hadn't wanted to be with me for a long time, labeling our wedding as a mistake. Sherry objected, expressing her unwillingness to get a divorce. She insisted that she loved me and wanted to be married forever. Regrettably, I responded that I no longer loved her, citing the no-fault divorce state we were in. I explained that splitting assets equally was the norm, and we could avoid a messy legal process unless one of us cheated and infidelity could be proven, which was unlikely in our case. I proposed dividing our money equally, planning to visit the bank the next day. I mentioned the need to open new accounts, get new credit cards, change utility bills, and sell the house, with a realtor scheduled to put it on the market on Wednesday. Sherry, feeling overwhelmed, objected, expressing uncertainty and asking me to stop. She cried again as I assured her that I had already packed my things and would be staying in a hotel until a permanent move. I suggested she stay in the house until it was sold. Sherry shouted for me to wait, but I insisted there was no need, emphasizing the urgency to handle everything before Friday. Confused, she demanded to know the significance of that particular day. I casually mentioned that Friday was the day she had planned a date with Todd, her boyfriend. I suggested it was the day they intended to spend the night in a hotel together for a passionate evening. Sherry froze, her eyes wide and mouth agape. As she attempted to respond, I pulled out a folder containing a summary report from a private investigator. I showed her the section detailing her plans with Todd on Friday night. Interrupting her, I pointed out that the report confirmed their reservations at the Gaylord Texas for that night. When she started to explain, I cut her off, mockingly suggesting she might claim, "It's not what it looks like." I reminded her of the pictures capturing her and Todd kissing at lunch. Staring at me, tears streaming down her face, Sherry apologized quietly. With a wide smile on my face, I declared, "Now I remember exactly when I stopped loving you." I revealed that it was the day I discovered her plans to involve me in a betrayed man scenario, mirroring the betrayal from my ex-wife. She blurted out an apology, desperately trying to convince me that she didn't love Todd. According to her, the rendezvous with him was just a fling to rekindle our relationship. She assured me that after spending the night with Todd, we would spend the rest of the weekend having passionate love-making. She claimed Todd said it would turn me on and revitalize our sensuality. I countered, expressing my skepticism about revitalizing our lovemaking life by being with someone else instead of having it with me. I questioned the logic behind her actions. She attempted to change tactics, mentioning that Todd said I would be okay with it if it made her happy. I reiterated that I wanted her to be happy with me as we used to be, not with another man. I couldn't fathom how she thought I would be okay with such a proposition, given my clear stance against infidelity. She tried to justify her actions by claiming it wouldn't be infidelity since she would have my permission. Firmly, I stated that it would never happen, realizing that I should have understood that from the beginning. I expressed my disbelief at how I could have allowed boredom and loneliness to lead me down this path. I admitted that Todd had sparked my interest again. In response to her questioning how I could be bored and lonely when we were happily in love, I acknowledged that I didn't know. She continued, suggesting that I might have felt that way because I cut us off, stopped having lunch with her, and avoided spending time together. She accused me of choosing to put myself in that position and spending time with Todd instead of her, creating a situation where both Todd and I were bored and lonely. She denied the accusation, insisting that she couldn't believe she would have intentionally distanced herself. She recounted how I had told her I was too busy for lunch, and on one occasion, I had even texted her to go without me. She believed it was my decision for us to stop having lunch, and I never mentioned it, which she thought indicated I didn't realize the change. Sherry expressed that I had been so absorbed in my world with Todd that I didn't notice I was losing her. She declared that she didn't want Todd. She wanted me and us to be the way we used to be. Apologizing, she admitted to screwing up and giving up on us. I insisted it was too late, shaking my head in disagreement. Sherry pleaded, promising to quit her job, work elsewhere, and never see Todd again. She professed her love for me and claimed she hadn't cheated because they didn't have lovemaking. She acknowledged her foolishness, stating that Todd meant nothing to her and begging me not to leave. I maintained that it wasn't that simple, disagreeing when she said I stopped her before she went too far. I argued that just lovemaking would have sealed the deal. Sherry protested, saying they were just friends, and I countered, emphasizing that she should have been friends with me more than anyone else. Overwhelmed, Sherry dropped her head in her arms, sobbing, and vowed never to neglect me or take me for granted again. Sherry pleaded with me, asking if we could treat the situation as a big mistake and begging for forgiveness. I responded, stating that it wasn't just a mistake but a betrayal of our love. She insisted that her heart had always been mine, and I was the one who was willing to give my body to another man. I reminded her that she stopped me and questioned if my love for her was so insignificant that I couldn't fight for it. Expressing that she meant everything to me and that I'd fight for her, Sherry claimed she would die for me. I harshly declared my lack of affection, causing her to scream and attempt to pull me towards her. Despite her apologies and pleas, I asserted that while I believed she was sorry, it didn't change the fact that I no longer loved her. I assured her that she had Todd for comfort. Upon her revelation that Todd was married and only interested in a physical relationship, I grinned and suggested that his wife might have something to say about that. I informed her that both Todd's wife and I had used the same divorce attorney, handing her a folder containing the investigator's report, pictures of her with Todd, and details of the divorce proposal. I advised her to read the entire document. Sherry pleaded with me not to take such actions, suggesting that if I wanted to accompany her to the bank, I should call and let her know. I got up from the table and walked out of the house, ignoring the sound of my wife crying. Update. Sherry grappled with the divorce, and to avoid a prolonged and expensive legal battle, I agreed when the judge recommended marriage counseling. The counseling surpassed my expectations, fostering open and judgment-free communication between Sherry and me. She gained insight into why Todd's advances nearly jeopardized our marriage, and I conveyed the pain and humiliation she had caused. The counselor took pride in our progress. After a few sessions, I returned home, and we shared several passionate moments. Sherry willingly embraced my desires erotically. A year later, we had rekindled the loving connection we shared at the onset of our marriage. Sherry switched jobs and joined my company. We commuted together, had lunch daily, not out of obligation but genuine desire. In fact, we did nearly everything together. We adorned a small Christmas tree, completed abandoned paintings, took up another ceramics class, and enrolled in ballroom dancing. To my surprise, a box of colored pens I found wasn't dry. One night while cuddling under a blanket and watching You've Got Mail, Sherry kissed me and conveyed the need to discuss something important. Tears welled in her eyes, causing a moment of panic as my heart skipped a beat. Without giving me a chance to respond, Sherry revealed, "You're going to be a daddy." I smiled, wiped away her tears, and in a playful manner mimicked Tom Hanks saying, "Don't cry, Sellers." So I'm just obsessed with happy endings.
All right, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in.
I'm Bob, a 48-year-old trucker. Once I had a blissful marriage, but everything changed in an instant, causing me to lose not only my family, but also my job and the house I purchased with my savings a decade ago. I'm prepared to share how my wife's betrayal altered my life as a truck driver. The road has become my second abode, where hours behind the wheel blend into an endless stream. Scenery passes like mist, with new people and places emerging continually. At times, I've had to sleep in the cabin, wrapped in a blanket against the cold. Endless traffic jams from accidents or construction disrupt my journey, yet stopping at a motel for the night, enjoying a hot shower, and sinking into a soft bed provides solace. Trucking presents both challenges and opportunities. Through this job, I provided a good life for my wife, Melissa, and our beloved daughter, Nancy. I aimed to be home as much as possible, though long-haul trips often caused me to miss important events. Nevertheless, they always welcomed me eagerly upon my return. At home, Nancy would rush to me with cries of joy, wrapping me in tight hugs and sharing every detail. Melissa greeted me warmly with a smile and delicious dinner. Despite the long journeys, it's difficult to say our relationship was joyful. I married Melissa upon learning of her sudden pregnancy, feeling I had little choice. She was studying to be a nurse and didn't want to drop out of college, so I took up trucking to support our family and her education. While the job kept me from spending much time with Melissa, respect and care endured. When Nancy was born, my life underwent a dramatic change, and I found true love in my darling daughter. She brought light to my life amid countless roads and passing landscapes outside my truck window. I returned home, not just for creature comforts, but for the joy of seeing Nancy. She always greeted me first, and holding her tight revived me after exhausting weeks. We cherished our time together, visiting the zoo, riding carnival rides, and playing games. I shared stories of my travels, and she confided in me. Even when away, she missed me terribly, calling every evening before bed. I knew my hard work ensured Nancy's comfort and happiness. Her love inspired me to endure the challenges of trucking. Now 18 and beginning college, Nancy appears grown up, but she'll always be my little girl. Even when I return home late at night, she greets me with a smile and warm hug, a cherished tradition. Melissa isn't home due to her night shifts at the hospital, not expecting my return. After work, I shed my jacket and shoes, heading to the kitchen for a meal and some tea. Nancy kindly warms up food in the microwave and sets the kettle on as I recount my trip to Oregon. I share tales of the rugged cliffs, stunning Crater Lake, Smith Rock State Park, the enchanting Toketee Falls, and the majestic Mount Hood. I express the desire to take the whole family there for a vacation to revel in the breathtaking scenery and nature together. Listening silently, Nancy refrains from commenting on my proposal. "So, how have you and Mom been without me?" I inquire with a grin, anticipating their longing for my return. To my surprise, Nancy's eyes brim with tears. "What's wrong?" I ask, alarmed. I've always struggled with others' tears, especially my daughter's. Suddenly she sobs and embraces me, burying her head against my chest as she did when she was younger. "It's been tough at home without you," Nancy whispers. Her words startle me. It appears that while I've been traversing the long, monotonous roads, my wife has been entertaining a stranger at home. Iron, as he's called, claims to be a co-worker and friend, but his presence unsettles Nancy. He behaves inappropriately, lounging shirtless, propping his feet on the couch, laughing loudly, and making crude jokes. He helps himself to others' belongings without permission, rifling through my books, tools in the garage, and kitchen cabinets. Despite Nancy's requests for him to respect their property, he dismisses her concerns with laughter. His presence makes Nancy feel unsafe in her own home, turning it into the abode of an unwelcome guest who behaves as if he owns the place. When he visits, Nancy locks herself in her room, but his booming laughter and conversations with her mom still reach her ears. She's deeply troubled by her mother's sudden disregard for their once orderly, cozy, and harmonious home in the presence of a stranger. Matters escalate when Nancy reveals that this man enters her room unannounced, rummages through her belongings, and asks intrusive questions about her personal life. He also makes inappropriate comments about her appearance. Despite Nancy's attempts to discuss the issue with her mother and requests to stop inviting this person, her pleas fall on deaf ears. Since his arrival, her mother has neglected Nancy, focusing solely on him. In my mind's eye, I picture my return, longing to restore the tranquility of our home. I vow not to tolerate such behavior under my roof. Suspicions of my wife, Melissa, cheating with another man send shockwaves through me, igniting a storm of anger and fury. Though tempted to release my pent-up rage by smashing or breaking something, Nancy's fearful gaze tempers my anger momentarily. I resolve to handle the situation tactfully, planning to catch my wife red-handed and confront the intruder who dares to invade my home and pester my daughter. I message Melissa, feigning a delay on the road and booking a nearby motel room just a block away. The plan is simple. If the lover returns, Nancy will alert me, and I'll rush back immediately. Thankfully, I didn't have to wait long. Just 2 days later, my daughter phoned, and I rushed home to confront the situation. Trying to contain my trembling from the surge of tension and adrenaline, I stealthily entered the house through the back door, heading straight for the bedroom where laughter and voices could be heard. After a tense moment of anticipation, the bedroom door burst open, crashing against the wall. Caught in the act, the lover and my wife were locked in a kiss, abruptly interrupted by my arrival. There was no denying my wife's infidelity now. Melissa appeared startled, almost unable to comprehend my sudden appearance. The intruder, clad only in pants, glared at me with suspicion and irritation, demanding to know who I was in a rude manner. Acting as though I was the intruder, I replied with my fist connecting solidly with his face. The following moments were a blur of red-hot fury. My fists flew, finding their target on his face, ribs, and gut. Eventually, the man collapsed unconscious on the floor. Breathing heavily, I turned to face Melissa. Her expression was one of shock and horror. "What have you done?" she whispered bitterly, tears welling in my eyes, overwhelmed by feelings of betrayal and loneliness. After the initial shock wore off, Melissa called for an ambulance. The agonizing minutes of waiting felt like an eternity until the sound of sirens finally approached. Paramedics quickly attended to the unconscious man, taking him away on a stretcher. Melissa and I accompanied him to the hospital, where he was admitted for observation, leaving us to wait outside, feeling incredibly awkward in each other's presence. Sitting in silence, I replayed the events of the evening in my mind. Why had I finally confronted my wife? We talked extensively that night. She confessed to feeling unloved for a long time, with my constant absence due to work and my focus on our daughter. She harbored jealousy towards our daughter and craved affection herself. Despite living under the same roof, our busy schedules kept us apart, leaving her feeling lonely and neglected. The lover provided a temporary escape from her mundane life, offering companionship in her solitude. Fortunately, his injuries were not severe, diagnosed as a concussion. Following that fateful night, Melissa and I decided to part ways. Our marriage, built more on obligation than love, had been fractured for some time. We initiated divorce proceedings and divided our assets equally. For me, it was a heavy blow. Despite years of dedication, our marriage never achieved the happiness I longed for. Letting go of a relationship filled with painful memories was difficult. However, for the sake of our daughter, I knew I had to move forward. Melissa relocated to another city where she began anew, eventually finding love again and remarrying. Though forgiving my ex-wife wasn't easy, for Nancy's sake, we maintained civility. While Nancy visited her mother occasionally, she always felt like a stranger in her new family. Her true home remained with me, where she was genuinely cherished. Despite life's trials, our bond grew stronger, and we found true happiness in each other's company.